It took a while to get here. Arkansas got back home. 4 games in their first 6 were on the road to start SEC play. Not an excuse for a start, I think, when Arkansas looks back at that stretch. That opening loss at LSU, a team that came into today in the cellar, tied with the Hogs and Mississippi State and, of course, Ole Miss. This was a cellar dweller battle today. But Arkansas, struggled a little bit early, trying to find its way. We've seen that from Arkansas teams that are really good, though. First half feeling things out, kind of, closing first halves on a pretty good note. I thought Arkansas did that when Joseph Pinion came in today and knocked down a couple of threes, really, punishing Ole Miss for that zone defense. Arkansas's got to find ways to attack zone defenses, and part of that is having a shooter on the floor. It helps spacing, but also it helps that a guy can knock down some shots. But welcome to Hogvillenet YouTube Live. Glad you could join me for post game. We love doing this, especially after the win, because we know fans are going to be a little bit more excited about where things stand with the Razorbacks after a victory. And we've seen Arkansas fight its way back in back-to-back seasons coming into this season after rough starts in SEC play. Now, the 1-5 start, you have to go back to John Pelfrey back in 08-09. That team, had a really good non-conference, knocked off top 10 rated Texas and Oklahoma at home in the non-conference, then immediately fell face planted in SEC play. Also started, I think that team was 1-5 after its first 6 games in league play, ended up 2-14. I don't think that's the destiny for these Razorbacks, but they are now 5 back on the winning side, 9-1 at home. We know the one blemish is against Alabama in a game that went down to the wire. But the Razorbacks, I thought today, what was so important is they finally had a game where they put together wins in 3 categories that if you went back each game, they might have won one of these or maybe 2, but they got all 3 of these. And even though some of it was ugly, they won turnovers 17-11. It was a +9 advantage in points off turnovers, 15-6. I thought that was big for an Arkansas team that's really just getting crushed in the turnover battle for most of SEC play. They also won 3-point shooting. You're not going to see that much. Both of these teams came into this game 2 of the worst 3-point shooting teams around. Arkansas, 20 attempts today might be a little bit rich for their diet in terms of what their team strengths are. But look, Devo Davis was solid from 3 today. I mentioned Joseph Pinion. He came in 3 of 6. Devo finished 3 of 5. You're going to take a combined 6 of 11, even if it's those 2, from any 2 players on Arkansas's team. How often does Arkansas have multiple players even hit 2 3-pointers in a game, let alone 2 that hit 3 each? We saw Jordan Walsh knock one in, but this, I think he might actually made a couple, but this was a big game for Arkansas from behind the 3 line. 8 of 20 for 40%. Ole Miss wasn't a very good team. Smartly didn't take very many, only 2 in the first half for the Rebels. They played to their strengths. Ended up 5 of 13, 38%, but Arkansas was a little better percentage-wise and certainly better in volume. And then the free throw line. This is where Arkansas in these most recent 3 losses just got hammered in the attempts differences, especially in the second half where Alabama, then it was Vanderbilt, then most recently, everybody remembers this, Missouri, getting a ton of free throws in the second half relative to Arkansas, and then finishing those games 10 or more free throw attempts than the Razorbacks. But a lot of that happened in the second half. Today, Arkansas didn't shoot well from the line, 9 of 17, just over 50%, but they had 4 more attempts than Ole Miss today. And Ole Miss wasn't good either, 6 of 13, below 50%. So Arkansas wins that battle not only in attempts, makes, but efficiency, even though it's ugly efficiency. You combine that with winning the 3-point shooting and the turnover battle. Again, we may not see an Arkansas team. I don't want to jinx it. Maybe they will, but how often are we going to see an Arkansas team win all 3 of those categories? I thought it was huge. The rebounding was basically even 31-30. Razorbacks had a 1 rebound advantage there. Ole Miss was a little bit better in fast break scoring. We're going to talk more about this Arkansas team's struggles in transition. Arkansas, I thought coming into this season was going to be one of their better transition teams. Nick Smith Jr. and Trevor Brazile being out impacts that because we saw both of those guys in Europe get off in transition. But this team is not good in transition. Arkansas has too many fast break opportunities where they can't even get a shot up. They can't orchestrate it correctly, or when they do, it's awkward or they're out of position. So we're going to talk more about that. Arkansas did lose that battle just narrowly. But Arkansas was also +8 in points in the paint, which is what you expect from a team that, doesn't have a lot of quickness and smaller guards but they do have some size, and so you expect Arkansas to win those paint wars. There have been very narrow margins most of SEC play of late. Arkansas, steps up in this game to go +8, so that's a little bit bigger margin than Arkansas enjoyed. Arkansas was blowing teams out points in the paint in non-conference. We know this is a different caliber of competition and quality of teams in SEC play. So this was a big deal. I think we look around the board. Anthony Black leads the team with 17 points, punctuated the win with a dunk at the end. I think he had a couple of dunks today, but I thought with his 8 assists, that's the kind of assist game I expect to see more of from AB. Still some turnover issues there with him, but you held it down to 11 as a team. Musselman likes it to be 9 or less. You'll live with 11 when you're turning the other team over 17 times. And even when Arkansas has been competitive in turnovers, they've been getting destroyed in points off turnovers, regardless of the actual turnover margins. Not today. Arkansas +9, again, 15-6. So they were almost 3-1 in that category, and they got to have that at home. You got to be able to capitalize at home. This looked more like an Arkansas team, like I said, feeling its way out, trading punches in the early rounds, first half. Pinion comes in and strokes a couple of threes, 8 consecutive points in a run that put Arkansas was down a point, put them up by 3 at halftime. Then you saw Arkansas, a 6-2 run early in the second half to expand it to their biggest lead to 7. Devo hits a 3, one of his threes, and now it's 10. And Arkansas pretty much lived with a double-digit lead, got it up to 21-point advantage in that second half. You saw Ole Miss go on a late 11-1 run to cut that down to 11 with just over 4 minutes. I tweeted this out because I'm wondering at that point, are we going to see a replay? Arkansas had 10-point leads in the previous 2 games. This one was at 21, but it got shaved right down to 10 pretty quickly with about 4 minutes left, and that was about the time frame that Missouri made its move at home, living at the free throw line. We could talk some about that today since we didn't have a post game the other night. I had technical issues with this sweet phone that I have. But nonetheless, Arkansas it flips the script of not finishing strong. These are the type of finishes we're used to seeing Arkansas have. You look at the last several possessions of the game, Arkansas maintained that cushion. It never got down to even a 2-possession lead. So Arkansas did its job, winning by double-digit margin, by the way, 12 points today, 69-57. That's their first double-digit win since North Carolina exactly a month ago, December 21st at Bud Walton Arena. Since then, we know they were down 17 to come back and have to overcome a Missouri team at home 2 weeks before it lost to Missouri in its previous game. So those teams end up, winning on their home courts. But this was Arkansas's first double-digit win in a month, and its first, obviously, now against an SEC opponent. You'll take them any way you can get them, but it's still Ole Miss, looked like the 9-9 team that I thought it would look like coming in. It's a well-coached team. Kermit Davis, they do a good job of keeping tempo down, keeping the score, manageable for them in the 60s. That's, they're not a high-scoring team. And they battle, but they don't have the overall talent Arkansas has. And I thought it was very interesting today. We keep talking about for so often Nick Smith Jr. being out, Trevin Brazile being out. Who are guys that are going to step up? We're starting to see more and more. If you go back to Arkansas's 2 wins in SEC play, it's been Joseph Pinion being the big spark when Arkansas can't deal with these zone defenses in first halves to kind of to get the tide starting to turn. It's been Joseph Pinion. There's been other guys helping, but if you really look at his spark and an ability to knock down just a few shots from outside, it's what turned that Missouri game. It's what helped turn this game. Pinion had another 5-0 stretch in the second half. He scores in waves, so all 13 of his points, matching his career high against Missouri, were scored in consecutive scoring runs, personal scoring runs for Joseph Pinion. And those are the kind of flurries you want to have when you struggle offensively. And guys that can knock down catch and shoot threes. I mean, we're seeing it with Isaiah Joe in the NBA right now. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA and one of the best shooters percentage-wise when you look at some of his statistics and advanced stats of all time. And he's a quick strike guy. In this day and age of basketball, the way defenses especially scheme with teams having comparable athletic talent and size positionally in some ways, guys that can just keep it easy and knock down some shots can be big and can help you go on quick runs when otherwise your defense might be struggling. And so I think Joseph Pinion has been huge for Arkansas in these opportunities. We know that his playing time has increased. The last game out against Missouri, he had that good first half. He started the second half, and Ricky Council played off the bench after struggling the first half, and Council went off late and up with 25 points. This was another bad game for Ricky Council. There was so similar script. Bad first half, didn't score. Got the first bucket in the second half for the Hogs, but had a bad turnover. Came out of the game, and that was it. I mean, and Pinion played a solid game. He had a block shot. Got on the glass a little bit. I think he had 4 or 5 rebounds, but kudos to Joseph Pinion. We saw Darian Ford get a little bit more run again in this game in the first half. I thought Mikel Mitchell was big time. Kamani got the start today. I think it was the first game Makai didn't start, but it was Mikel. Now, he hurt his toward the end of the game. He was in a boot. We'll see where that goes. Arkansas certainly can't use any more injuries that are long lasting. Hopefully it's not something that keeps him out very long, but Mikel Mitchell had a good game. He was the Mitchell I thought that stepped up the most today, and it shows you that Arkansas's depth at its front line, now it's starting to thin out if he's going to be hurt any extended period of time. But he was the answer on the front line today. It wasn't Kamani, and Makai did a little bit when he got in, but it was really Mikel. So it's very interesting to see the dynamics that Arkansas is having to turn to right now. You look at these next 2 games at home that'll sandwich around the Big 12 SEC Challenge next weekend on the road against Baylor, a ranked Baylor team. But these are winnable games. You get LSU, again, down in the cellar, wrestling around down there with Arkansas, and Ole Miss coming into today. Obviously, Arkansas will be expected to win that game. They'll be favored to win that game at home midweek. Then you go for that Baylor game. And then you're back home for A&M. Now, A&M's has the same game. It's the same movie every year. 4 or 5 losses in non-conference. You scratch your head. That's not a very good team. Very disappointing. They underperform, and they get in league play, and they're trouble. Started 5-0 so far. So we'll see where A&M is in 10 days when Arkansas comes back home after that Big 12 SEC Challenge to wrap up that 3-game home swing. But that's another winnable game for sure at home. A&M probably be of LSU and A&M, I would predict A&M to be the tougher of those two, the way that the Aggies are playing right now. But Arkansas could claw its way back out of a hole to finish up first half of league play, because if you can win the next 2 home games in league play, let's put the Baylor game and the SEC Big 12 Challenge aside right now, then Arkansas is right there with a chance to get to, they can't get to 500 at the end of league play, but, they could pick up one more win to get just 1 game below. And then we know what they do in second half of league play. So everything's still on the table for this Hog team. I know it's been disappointing. I know I made the comparison to the John Pelphrey era 14 years ago in that start. This is a different Arkansas team. One of the things we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to give an update. I wrote about this the last couple of days. Nick Smith Jr. not only back in Fayetteville, school started back on Tuesday, spring semester. He's been going through his process, working on getting 100%. He's been doing that away, but he returned this week. He's been back in the practice facility with the team. That's a good sign. He was on the bench today with the team. We reported this within the last 24 hours that this would happen. So there was some misinformation out there, just a little bit. A lot of people speculate that he'll be back by the LSU game. Don't plan on that. Nothing's changed on what the expected timeline is, and we know that there shouldn't be an expectation based on what Musselman said in my reporting for him to play through the end of this month. So that means the soonest opportunity would be sometime in February. And what February looks like is there are 10 league games still to go in February once the calendar page turns. We're not sure when and if Nick Smith Jr. will get back after January, because he's got to get to 100%. So I just kind of want to walk back through some of the stuff we'd already talked about. Back on January 7th, when I went through most of this, I mentioned that even though that was the timeline for a potential return to playing, that would only be a few games that he'd be off the bench, that he'd be back with the team. He'd be back on the sidelines at games. He'd be back as a Razorback, still going through his process, trying to get to 100% to compete as a Razorback. And I said that would happen much sooner than the end of January, and that's what's played out. So everything that I've been told has played out exactly as I've been told to this point. Things can change as things move forward. We always want to remind folks there's no guarantee that he's going to play again as a Hog, because he's still got to get back to 100%. But I've always said that's the least likely, in my opinion, of the outcomes. I think it's more likely that he'll get there at some point so that he can play again as a Razorback. We'll see. That thinking can change. Obviously, he needed more time to go through the process working to get there than the time he took before, when he missed the first 6 games and came back and was still dealing with some of the issues there. It's not uncommon for players to miss extended periods of time for injuries that are not considered chronic or serious or requiring surgery. I'm not going to talk about other players specifically, but just in general, at all levels of basketball, players will take off extended periods of time dealing with certain issues. So this is not unusual. It's just a little bit different this time than it was the previous comeback because it's taken a little longer. And then we'll see where it goes from there. Again, that's kind of where we are with Nick Smith Jr. It's almost identical to the report I gave back after the Auburn game on, I think it was January 7th. But what's different now is that he is physically back. He's back. He's back at the practice facility with teammates during practice time. He was at the game today. There'll be more of that moving forward. Okay. The other thing is Arkansas had a couple of class of 2025 prospects at the game today. We reported on this on Friday that this would happen. The class of 2025, so it's down the road a little bit. But Bug Edwards, a 6'3" guard at Duncanville High School. We know that's where Anthony Black's from. We know that that's been a basketball factory. It's been the #1 rated high school team in the nation, by the way, this season. But this is a young guard that has, a few months ago, we reported that he'd be coming in for an unofficial visit for this game. And it certainly landed like we reported a while back. It seemed like it was a few months ago when we found out he was coming. But he was one of the visitors today. Amari Slim Reed, a 6'8", versatile guy, combo guy out of the Dallas area at Lancaster High School. So we see Arkansas with that concentrated effort. A couple of DFW guys from that 2025 class that were in for this game today. So you haven't heard as much about those guys because they are younger. We know from 2025, Arkansas's got that offer out to in-state Terrion Burgess, the 6'9" wing, who's still growing, top national number 17, according to Rivals. He's going to be a 5-star in most of the services before it's all said and done, having a fantastic season down in Benton. So that's an in-state guy from that class. But to me, it's always key when you have home games on Saturdays because these players are going through their seasons on the high school level. It's always a key to get them on campus when you can. In weekend games, Arkansas really hasn't had any. Their first home game in league play was Missouri. That was a midweek game. So this was their first weekend game, and it was an 11 a.m. tip. So that made it a little bit tougher. But you got to get players in for visits. We know the midweek game against Bama was a big one. Arkansas had an official visitor, Ian Jackson, national number 2 5-star, who right after that visit, a few days later, committed to North Carolina. They also had Dink Pate, another 5-star, 6'8". Both of those guys class of 2024. Pate was in for an unofficial visit. So you try to make the most of your opportunities with home games. Again, Arkansas had the 2 midweekers before this finally getting a weekend. We remember back last year in February when Arkansas had those big heavyweight matches against ranked Tennessee, then #1 Auburn, top 5 Kentucky, and they got a lot of high-level players in to visit. So you want to continue to get guys in when you can. So I thought that was big for recruiting. Let's talk a little bit, too, about the McDonald's All-American game for the class of 2023. Those selections are going to be announced in just a few days, and Arkansas's got 2 5-star guys. Bay Fall, who's a top 15 in several services. I think he's 19th in ESPN. 6'11" forward center that signed with Arkansas in the earlier period. We know Bay at Denver Accelerated Schools in Denver, Colorado. We know that Bay's likely. To me, I don't think there's not much doubt for me that he's going to be selected as a McDonald's All-American. I do think with Layden Blocker now, he moved up to number 21. That was an 8-spot move in Rivals updated rankings that just came out the other day. He moved down from 21 to 26 in ESPN rankings, but he moved up in the composite from 25 to 22. Still a 5-star. The McDonald's All-American game, they bring in 24 players, so he's kind of on the cut line there. I think he's, with all that he's done with his body of work. When you look at the Coach Wooten Top 150 camp, which is a McDonald's All-American platform, he has been one of the top performers there the last 3 years. been invited every year, has been one of the top performers. Getting his team to the Elite Eight in Peach Jam. Well, I guess I'm having technical difficulties again. I'm not sure what happened there, but I was talking recruiting. I was talking McDonald's All American game. Bayfall and Layden Blocker, Arkansas's two 5-star signees from the 2023 class. And I think I do. I was saying I thought Fall was probably, I'm more confident about him securing a spot for that. We'll see how it plays out. Again, he's ranked in the top 15 to 20. Blocker between 20 and 25. 24 players invited. It's not always exactly the top 24 players in the ESPN rankings. ESPN, there's thought process that they're more closely tied their rankings to how those selections go. I know of at least one player, Robert Dillingham, who's with Overtime Elite, is not eligible. I think he's ranked 11th in ESPN's ranking. So there's one player out of the top 25 who's not eligible. Blocker sits at number 26. He's moved from 21 to 26 in ESPN's update, but he's moved up in other ones, including the composite at number 22. So just to wrap that up, Arkansas's got a great chance to have two players in McDonald's game that have already signed. Last year, we know how that played out. Arkansas had two signees and then a commitment with Anthony Black, and so that was three players. Got a chance for two. Probably, at minimum, we'll get one in there, and that's the kind of recruiting momentum you want in your program. You want to make the most. If you're getting 5 stars, you got a great shot that they're going to play in the McDonald's game. Gets more exposure for your program. So you want things to continue in that direction. Arkansas has been one of the better programs in recruiting the portal as well. So when you put it all together, it's why Arkansas has had back-to-back Elite Eights. I know fans right now, I've seen a lot of chatter. We're going to talk about this. A lot of stuff on social media. Arkansas's 5 stars overrated. Absolutely not. They're not overrated. It's simply this. Two of your best players, and we'll call them both 5 stars. We know Nick Smith Jr. was the top incoming player in the country from the high school ranks. Trevor Brazile was a 5-star out of the portal. Most portal players that you can get some really good ones, but most of them aren't guys that eventually have first round ceiling stuff for the NBA draft, even as soon as a year. And he's one of those guys. There aren't many of those in the portal. Most guys in the portal have been around for a while. Brazile had a freshman season at Missouri. So that's like 2 5-star guys, and they're Arkansas's most versatile offensive players when you look at 3-level scoring from each of them. Even Brazile was a threat from 3. So I think that's a big deal having those guys out. If you go back to Arkansas's non-conference, they were only healthy for 1 game. But at minimum, they either had Brazile while Smith was out, or they had Smith after Brazile went down until you got into SEC play. Both guys were out for North Carolina Asheville, but that was a 34-point win. That was not a worthy opponent. Since that time, part of Arkansas' struggles has been the fact that they're still trying to figure out how to get by. I mean, you've got guys that are now producing offensively that you probably would rather not take as many shots. But a guy like Devo Davis, who's taken a lot of heat for some of his decision-making, turnover, shot selection, has been huge. You go back to the double-double against Bama, keeping Arkansas in that game. Today's taking shots. He helped Arkansas get to that 10-point lead at Vanderbilt. He helped Arkansas have a 10-point lead late against Missouri. His last 3-point make at Missouri, when Missouri had got within 7 points, but Arkansas back up by 10 with just right around the 5-minute mark. So Devo Davis has been big for this team. He's some very good passes to set guys up. We know that he can get steals and play lockdown defense at times. I thought today on his shooting from 3, he looked a little bit different, not just because he was making them at a good percentage. I thought he was a little bit more stable with his base. He didn't take too much time. If you overthink a shot and take too much time, sometimes you can miss it. But I didn't think he looked as rushed either. I thought when he stepped into his threes, he was square. He had good footwork, and he was just patient enough, and he looked confident on him. Is Devo Davis a guy that you want flying 5 to 6 threes a game? Not necessarily, but if this is a blueprint, I thought today, even with his 3 turnovers, I'm going to take, what was it? I mean, the guy had, I think he finished with, I'm not sure now. I think he finished with 16 points. He had 5 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal. He did have 3 turnovers. Beginning, it was a fairly low turnover game for Arkansas in a game that it really dominated that category, where it really hasn't been able to do that. We talked about Anthony Black with the 8 assists to go with the game high 17. Walsh and Pinion both knocking down threes, both having big offensive input in this game where we know that's where Arkansas can struggle, especially when if they're not making shots, but they do get to the free throw line, they're not very good there. They weren't today. They were better than Ole Miss, but they still weren't very good. But to see Pinion and Walsh do what they did offensively to help this team, and both of them made plays on defense. I thought Walsh was really good on the glass again today. I think he had 7 rebounds. And then Mikel Mitchell, I don't want to leave him out because I really thought, it's been a little bit at times musical chairs with Brazil out on production there. Graham's had a couple of good games, but not a guy that Musselman's really been able to count on. And we didn't see him. And then Makai, who's been the most consistent frontliner with Brazil out, didn't start today. And really it was Mikel who did most of the heavy lifting on that front line for the Hogs. Was not another, I'd say another game for Kamani here, where even though he started, he's had a couple of rough games in this last stretch of games. That fouling out at Vanderbilt and was a little more productive at Missouri, fouled out there. But I thought again Mikel Mitchell was huge. We'll see what happens and what we learn about that ankle was in a boot. Okay, we're back. Hogvillenet YouTube Live. Glad you're here. Hope you're enjoying your Saturday, especially after getting that Arkansas game and a win, back on the winning track, out of the way early. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. 69-57. I said this earlier. We're back on now. It was Arkansas's first double-digit win in a month. You got to go back to that Asheville game. 12-point win. Ole Miss isn't. We're not going to sit here and pretend like this was a huge win. I mean, this was a quad 3 win. You had to have. I think this was a must-win for many reasons. But I think the biggest one, Arkansas had a 4-game losing skid. 3 of those by double-digit margins, by the way. I thought Arkansas got hosed in Missouri at the end of that game. I'm not afraid to criticize officiating. I do it all the time on Twitter. But I rarely get to a point where I feel like that's why a team necessarily lost a game. And I really felt like that against Mizzou. Arkansas was up 10 late in that game, just under 5 minutes. Both teams had shot, I think, 24 free throws at that time. There's no recipe that says both teams have to shoot the exact same amount of free throws or even be close. But your eye test tells you how teams are playing. And all of a sudden, in the last 5 minutes, the only team fouling is Arkansas. Ole Miss didn't commit, Missouri a game ago. Arkansas goes 2 of 2 at the line while Missouri's shooting 15 of 16 in the last 4:51 of that game. That's a 13-point difference. Arkansas was up 10, loses by 3. There's your 13 points because the field goals were even in that stretch. So, and we know what those plays were like. We could rehash the Devo situation, the Makai Mitchell foul, a Kamani Johnson foul, 4 Arkansas players foul out, a regulation game that goes darn near 33 hours. There was a lot of issues in that game at the end. I do feel like Arkansas wins that game if there's just the foul calls didn't have to be exactly even, but they had to be right. And I thought they missed them. Go back to Devo's charge. The SEC admitted that they misinterpreted the rule and thought that they couldn't even review that play. If they had reviewed it, it's likely that it's overturned and he's shooting 2 free throws. But what they don't talk about is the hip check that twisted Devo around and got him more off balance. He was facing east and west. He started north-south drive. He was east and west when he made that final contact. So he was fouled before that. So there were several things that were pretty obvious. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. Unfortunately, I didn't have a live the other night after that game to spend any time on it, so I wanted to work that in. We've talked about Nick Smith Jr. today. We've talked a little bit already about what faces Arkansas in these next few games. I'm glad you're with me here at Hogvillenet YouTube Live. We love these post games, especially when the right team wins, because we know the fans that are tuning in, that's the team they're cheering for. It's no secret that Arkansas's had early SEC struggles. It's been worse this year than in previous 2 years. That doesn't mean they can't get it turned around. The home schedule's very friendly. It started today with Ole Miss. Struggling LSU comes in midweek. You do go on the road for the Big 12 SEC Challenge at Baylor, but that's house money because that's a ranked team. It's one of the top programs in the country. It's a matchup that if you go on the road and win that, it's great for your resume. If you lose it, it's not bad on your resume, and it's not a league loss when you're trying to scrap back into, competing for seedings and other things in league play. Then you get back home for an A&M team that, even though it's off to a great start in league play, is a team that Arkansas can defeat at home. And so Arkansas could be right back in the mix of things as it gets into February. And then comes down to, well, where do things sit with Nick Smith Jr. at that time? I've said it before, I'll say it again. Even where the record sits right now, even before today's game, Arkansas was projected still in the tournament. We know that they went from a 3 seed to a 4 seed to a 6 to a 7. Lenardi had them today, even down to an 8. But they can claw their way back. This has happened before. It's not a death knell. And you get a guy like Nick Smith Jr. back, and you have the potential. I go back and I look at the roster, and I now see one. We got to find out about injuries again. What's the deal with McHale? Even though he hasn't been a top rotation guy, Arkansas can ill afford to have any more loss of frontline depth. But it's a team, when I look at the roster, if you have a healthy Nick Smith Jr. back at 100%, that I could see getting to the final weekend. I could see that. To me, it was a no-brainer top 4 or 5 lineup with all hands on deck, Trevor Brazile, Nick, and everybody. But even without one of those guys, just Nick, I could see it as a team that could get to a Final Four. Right now, the way it's constructed, I've said it, I'll be consistent. I see it as a tournament team still. All the projections, despite the 5 losses in 6 games, tell you they'd make the tournament today if the season ended. Now, the way that trajectory's been going, it wouldn't finish that way. But Arkansas won today. And again, there's a blueprint for flipping things around and rewriting the narrative. And so this is how you do it. You start one game at a time. Here's that first win. And again, I look back at previous seasons where it was players that hadn't factored into that top rotation in non-conference or early league play. And more we're seeing Joseph Pinion put his stamp on helping Arkansas's offensive woes. Giving Arkansas a guy that can stretch the floor, have some gravity on defense, man. Open up those driving lanes, knock down shots when they come available. Everybody on Arkansas's offense right now, so we go back to the quality of 5-star talent. I was talking about that, and people saying that it might be overrated. It's just there's a lack of versatility now left over with some of the more highly regarded guys, because Nick and Trevin were your 2-3 level scorers. Everybody now is more about pound, drive, and get it going to the basket. And there's no versatility in the skill set. Pinion changes that because he's a guy that doesn't need to dribble the ball. You throw it to him, he catches. He's got a quick trigger and nice release, and we see the results when he gets opportunities. Again, Ole Miss is not a great team, but it's a team that plays pretty darn good defense. It grinds, and it dictated tempo today, and its zone gave Arkansas troubles. Up until the point Pinion came in, and that helped him. Devo knocked some down. We saw Jordan Walsh, fouled out after only 13 minutes against Missouri. There were some questionable calls there, but he was perfect in that game. Scored 12 points. Today, he got, so back-to-back double-figure scoring games for him. We saw him help Arkansas that way at the end of non-conference play when you go back to his performance against Oklahoma, which to that point was his best game probably. And then he goes and has a big night, his career high-scoring game in the next game against Bradley in North Little Rock. We know it's hard to win there. So he's had some ups and downs, but you're encouraged by the fact that Jordan Walsh now's had back-to-back games scoring in double figures. This is important because he's been pretty efficient overall when you combine those games. And so you want to see that progression for him. It takes pressure off other guys. Anthony Black's a guy that, he's not really a three-point shooter. He's had some games where he's had some high-scoring games, and he's knocking a few down. That's not his game. We saw the 8 assists today. We know he's not going to pull up for mid-range shots. He's going to get his getting downhill, finish at the rim, little floaters, runners, getting shots off the window. I thought Arkansas did a really good job early in this game of going glass. Some of these players kind of got their feel and their touch, getting into good angles to go off glass. This is one of the things I want to go old school on you. Corliss Williamson. There's nobody on this team that compares to him as far as playing style. But one of the greatest things Corliss used to do to help himself, because he wasn't an above the rim guy, is he got to great finishing angles because his frame and his will got him around the basket. So he wasn't finishing above the rim as much as he was getting great angles, leveraging his body, but getting great angles to use the glass. He did a lot of that in close range. And I saw more of that from guys today. Jordan Walsh, Anthony Black, even Devo Davis early in his drive game. To start the game, he had 4 points. I think Arkansas went up 10-9, but he had a couple of buckets in there. One of them, he went left. He's a lefty. The next time he drove right, but both times he went glass. So I think Arkansas players need to figure out, with so many of them being drive guys and most of their offense coming through the drive, is getting to better finishing angles. This is not a good team in transition, by the way. We saw that again today. Arkansas really struggles with a numbers advantage, running out. Unless someone's ahead of the pack, Arkansas really struggles when there's any kind of one defender, two defenders, of even getting a shot up. They have to turn the ball and turn around and bring it back out and then play half court offense, which is not a strength either with Smith. And obviously Brazil's not coming back. But I mention those guys because this is why I say the 5 stars aren't overrated, or Arkansas's top 100. There are plenty of guys, Pinion's playing now. He was a top 100 recruit. These guys aren't overrated, but there's not been a rich mix of versatility in the skill set. And so sometimes things bog down and look bad. But Opinion, where he may not be a guy that's going to be slashing and driving as much, although he's sprinkled a little bit of that in, he is a guy that gives you versatility on that offensive side. So it's a broken record right now. I've repeated it 2 or 3 times because I think it's important to understand that when you're missing key pieces, it's not that other guys are overrated. It's that you're now missing stuff that changed everything because of their abilities in different ways. I mean, Nick Smith Jr., we talk about 3-level scorer. I've always said he's a 5-level scorer. Most guys that are 3-level can get to the rim, knock down some threes, and then, somewhere either they're pull-up shooters in the mid-range or they're guys that attack with runners and floaters and kind of somewhere not all the way to the rim, but somewhere in between. Nick's got all of that. 3, rim, floaters, spinners, runners, getting closer to the basket. And then he can legit pull up 16, 17, 18 feet off the bounce, catch and shoot. So he's got a whole bunch of stuff he does outside the arc all the way to the rim. And then he's a clutch shot maker as well. So he's really a 5-level guy. But anyway, we'll see what happens with Nick Smith Jr. It impacts everything because he's also a very good facilitator. And I think he's a guy because he gets to the free throw line in bulk. I mean, he is a volume 3-point shooter because of all his creativity. And he puts guys on an island. And then they're guessing. And even when help rotates, he's got an answer. He's got a lot of counters. And teams end up a lot of times can't stop him fouling. I think he's well over 80% free throw shooter. Arkansas's been missing that. So again, guys aren't overrated. It's about what's missing and what that took away from your diversity of options. And that's been a big deal. Walsh looking more confident is a great side. Need him to keep stepping up. Exactly. We just talked about it. Thank you for that comment. I'm really bad about comments. Haven't seen as much pop up maybe 2 or 3 times as I'm going on and on. But yeah. And again, Walsh has been kind of up and down, putting together 2 or 3 good games, then maybe not having, maybe having 2 or 3 where it's not there. But now you're in league play, so you need more consistency from your top rotation guys. And so it's good to see him do that. He's still learning how to play without fouling. He's doing a better job offensively right now. He's been a guy that's attacked the glass. I'm pleased with his board work. That's been there. He just needs to be able to stay on the court, stay out of foul trouble, and then he needs that confidence on offense. Where I've seen at times where that's lacking, and then he'll have a couple of games where he hits 1 or 2, gets his confidence up, and now he's off to the races. Joseph Pinion's very interesting to me. I know he missed a bunny in transition there. That was one of Arkansas's misses, but he also had a layup. He had a block shot. Got in there and battled on the glass. He's not just a shooter. And he had a nice pass. He had a nice pass to AB in the second half underneath. Really nice pass. AB ended up kicking it out. But Joseph Pinion brings more to the table. He's got a good frame, sturdy frame at 6'5", pushing 6'6". I think he's a little more athletic than people probably realize. He had that knee injury in high school, and certainly that affected his athleticism. But he looks more and more like the guy pre-injury to me than he had in a long time. And I credit what they're doing at Arkansas as part of that with the strength and conditioning. He's gotten, I can see that he has gotten stronger and more confident. There's still going to be ups and downs with him defensively. He'll make a few plays because of his, I think better than average athleticism. But as far as lateral quickness and being out on the floor, sometimes that gets exposed a little bit. But no player is perfect, and he's gotten better in those areas at times. Sometimes it stands out a little more than others defensively. But Arkansas, even though it's had massive defensive struggles in the 2 most recent losses, when you looked at Alabama and Missouri, Vanderbilt, going back to Alabama, Vanderbilt, and then Missouri, even though they had some defensive struggles in those games. Alabama is one of the best teams offensively in the country. So is Missouri. Vanderbilt wasn't. That was kind of an anomaly. So I'm not going to make excuses for it. But Arkansas has been, of all of its issues, defense has not been chief among them overall. It was for a few game stretch there, so I'm not going to completely discount it. But Arkansas, to me, if they're going to embark on a turnaround, it's going to be at that end of the floor, just like it was in previous 2 years, where they've got to be sound. And I thought today, when I look across the board, you held an opponent below 60 points. Arkansas hasn't done that in a while. You win by 12, but you won the turnover battle. A lot of that's your defense, obviously. Again, holding the opponent down. But the other key was Ole Miss and we haven't talked about this, Ole Miss had a hot shooting first half, over 50%. So even though Arkansas was winning that turnover battle, Ole Miss was sticking to its knitting. Not a good three-point shooting team. Didn't bail Arkansas out with three-point attempts. Only took two. Drove it in. They hit some tough shots, too. Second half, Arkansas chopped that down from 52% and held Ole Miss to 37%. So 15 percentage points on field goal shooting in the second half. Ding, ding, ding. This is what Arkansas teams do. Halftime adjustments. Winning the second half, even if they barely won the first half or they're barely lost the first half and they've kind of been trading punches. Second half, turnarounds, and we saw that today. Again, not a good Ole Miss team, but it wasn't a very good Arkansas team lately, so something had to give. New comment on there, and I thought it was about Dunning, and I was talking still, and I was trying to read it, and I missed it. Hope that comes back around. Hope you're with me. We love doing these, but especially when Arkansas wins. Go to Hogville.net, by the way. It seems like football is now a year-round sport. Sports always are on some level, but the news cycle just doesn't end with football when you're talking portal and, recruits coming on campus, camps, coaching carousel. We see more coaching changes. Arkansas's loading up on offense and defense. And who's got all that nailed down for you at Hogville.net? It's Otis Kirk, the veteran who puts out, I think he probably publishes more articles for not only football, but football recruiting than anybody. He's on it. Dudley Dawson, big help, assistant in football. He's got baseball. Baseball season's coming up. He's all over that. He's got women's basketball. Arkansas's women's team is having a really strong season. Tough loss at number 3 LSU, but a valiant effort. So we got you covered at Hogville.net. I've already got a game story up. It's got some good detail in there. I'll add more to it and Musselman quotes. I can't wait to watch his post-game presser, but I want to come on here with you guys like I always do. Early start today. So I kept it back in the 501 and covered it from the television. But I'll be back up there for the next game. LSU game will speak a lot about our season. Well, why is Barry Dunning Jr. not getting minutes? Okay, so a couple of things there. I think a big part of what Arkansas has with guys like Ricky Council, Anthony Black, and Jordan Walsh, you've got guys in that 6'6", 6'7" range who are your more skilled guys. They're plenty athletic slashers. And so Dunning, Arkansas's rotation and Musselman's rotations just aren't expanded enough to have a fourth guy that's similar positionally, size-wise, athleticism-wise, and what they need from that type of player. And so to me, he's a guy that's going to help Arkansas at some point. It may even be again this year. He's helped Arkansas in 2 or 3 spots this year. But he's just not in the rotation right now. He is a great culture fit. The coaching staff loves him. And he's a guy that if he sticks around, not only can help Arkansas again at times this year at some point, but I think is going to be good for the program later on as a player, not just a culture fit. And so, to answer your question, there's just too many guys ahead of him. Ricky Council had an off day today. And when I look at things, when you talk about LSU we'll really learn something, we're going to learn something every game. I expect Arkansas to beat LSU at home. I thought Arkansas just destroyed itself at LSU, taking all those threes. I like the dynamic of AB, Devo, Pinion, Walsh, and Mitchell. Well, what's not to like? Arkansas turned its fortunes around, and those guys. I'm assuming Mitchell, you mean McKell today, but they turned their fortunes around after 4 straight losses and 5 out of 6, and you have to go back to Pelfrey's 2-14 dandy 14 years ago to see such a start through 6 games. Of course, look, matchups are different. Talent levels on teams are different. The good news for Arkansas is I don't think this LSU team. I think there might be more talent than Ole Miss has, but I think Arkansas at home, if it learns any lessons, if you're going to shoot threes and try to beat a zone, if that's what they throw at Arkansas again, you're gonna need a floor spacer out there during some of that stretch. Joseph Pinion, he needs more looks, and teams are going to throw defenses until they get out of it. That doesn't mean every game and every matchup is going to be the same, even if a team plays a zone, that he's the guy. Musman's we'll talk about that. Going into the season, I was really worried about the chemistry holding us back. That is clearly not the case. Chemistry's been tough because I keep talking about it. You lost so much versatility in your offensive skill